Well, welcome everyone. I am Yvonne Schwab, ACG Silicon Valley CEO. As many of you already know, ACGSV is the leading business-to-business networking organization in Silicon Valley, providing connections, thought leadership, and enabling personal and organizational growth. ACGSV offers an array of networking opportunities. With almost 15,000 members and 59 chapters across the world, ACG provides local connections with a global reach. Now, ACG Silicon Valley is offering a variety of virtual events in the coming months. We invite you to visit our website at acgsv.org to see the full calendar. This includes a member favorite tomorrow evening, our round robin with ACG San Francisco, an event on how to promote efficiencies and avoid cross-border M&A integration pitfalls next week, and of course, our holiday happy hour. Now, we're excited to offer you today's event, which would not have been possible without our sponsor, Dell Technologies, which is committed to transforming businesses, shaping the future of innovation, and developing technologies to drive human progress. And hopefully you have your lunches in front of you, also courtesy of Dell Technologies. So thank you very much. I would now like to introduce you to our moderator today, Haley Tabor, Vice President of Global Industries, Sales and Solutions at Dell Technologies. Haley leads the team focused on helping industry organizations around the world speed their digital transformation to capitalize on emerging technology trends such as IoT, multi-cloud, smart cities, machine learning, and virtual and augmented reality. In addition, she has been a great supporter of ACG Silicon Valley and is our chairperson. So now, without further ado, Haley.
Thank you, Yvonne, and thank you to our attendees for taking the hour over lunch to join us today. The topic about and around innovation at the edge is very near and dear to me. It's something that I get to work on and work with customers and partners every day. And it's a real pleasure to have an opportunity to moderate the panel with my friends, my colleagues, experts in this space who I've had a privilege to know through my last couple of years on this journey around edge and innovation at the edge. I'd like to first introduce Azita Martin. Azita, I guess you and I met a couple of years ago. Azita is the General Manager for Artificial Intelligence, Retail, and CPG at Nvidia. And, you know, Azita, I know, has done extensive work in building and scaling the artificial intelligence business in this sector and has tremendous amount of experience. So looking forward to what Azita can share today. I'd like to introduce Carlos Escapa. Carlos is with Facebook. He is the PyTorch Global Business Development Manager. Prior to that, and some of you may have met Carlos and Azita, they've attended previous ACG events and spoken as keynotes. Prior to that, Carlos was the Senior Business Development Manager at Amazon Web Services, building partner networks around machine learning for data science. And prior to that was at Virtual Sharp Software. So thank you, Carlos. Both Carlos and Azita do live in the Bay Area and are very active in the business community there. Thirdly, I'd like to introduce Willie Reed. Willie is the General Manager for Safety and Security and Computer Vision and Industry Edge at Dell Technologies. Willie has an extensive experience in IT, infrastructure, data protection, and cloud solutions, working with alliances and OEMs, and spends a lot of time in front of businesses that are looking at edge solutions for some of their business opportunities and challenges. So with that, I'd like to jump into the panel, just a little bit of sort of housekeeping items. We're going to spend probably the next 30 minutes with the panel in discussion, and then would love to open up to our attendees to share comments, provide any questions. The chat and Q&A are open, and at the end of the panel discussion, I'm happy to facilitate the Q&A segment of the session. So before we kind of jump into what we're seeing happen in the market with businesses, and we're going to talk a lot about kind of use cases and solutions, and we're also going to talk today about some of the challenges that businesses face and sort of what's on the future horizon. But I want to kick things off with the panelists just to level set. And Carlos, I'm going to ask you maybe just kind of help us when people hear IoT, they hear edge, they hear AI, ML. I mean, I think it would be really good to just get kind of your perspective with your extensive background. Define this for us in a simple way, if I could kind of put that to you. Because there's just, I think there's debates about what's edge, what's IoT, are they the same? And would love your insight on these kind of groupings of phrases that we're using in this space right now.
Very well, Hayley. I will try, although there isn't exactly a commonly agreed way of defining artificial intelligence. Indeed, it's difficult to define intelligence itself, right? But what we should do is think about artificial intelligence is an application. So we're talking about an IT asset here. So it's an application that has some sort of a cognitive process inside. So this could be normally tied to perception, okay? Being able to understand images, to see things, or to hear sounds and be able to interpret them, okay? On the basis of that, then, and this is by no means a restriction, but artificial intelligence in general is referred to something that you do not do through programming in the traditional sense. You do not have a set of instructions that you execute, but it's rather a different approach to problem solving. The core part of AI is machine learning, is models that are developed, they're created from a lot of data. And based on those models, that's where you start to understand the images or pictures or sounds and so on. IoT, on the other hand, is, you could just think about it simply as a device that has connectivity. Right. And IoT is the infrastructure behind it. That simple phrase actually hides a massive amount of complexity, from power management all the way out to keeping applications updated. So IoT refers to that general infrastructure that provides connectivity, updates, maintenance, and support of connected devices. So intelligence at the edge is a little bit of that, that intersecting area where you have devices at the edge that can actually execute AI applications. So these are the devices that can see, that can hear, and can take actions based on inputs that the devices receive.
So what about when we hear OT?
OT, IoT?
We hear like IoT, and maybe Willie, you can comment on that, right? We're hearing OT, IoT, edge. What's the difference?
Yeah, so I think so there's IT, which tends to lean towards kind of more the the IT side, the technical, the products, the infrastructure side, and then there's the OT side, which is how do you operate that, right? And a lot of that has to do with inserting new technologies, which also affect workflow, which also affect how people interact with their technology, which also affect what end users actually are kind of doing. But there's also a maintenance platform, or kind of how do I maintain both of those? It's very easy for us from an IT perspective to understand how do I deploy servers and storage and networking and security and all those other things. But then how do I actually consume and operate that technology as a user? Right. And when you get into edge computing, that's definitely an area where you not only have to think about the technology you're deploying, but how does that change the ecosystem? How does that change the workers and how they're interacting with it?
Right. So let's share with our audience a little bit about, in all of your experiences, we see what businesses are doing, and there's so much leading edge. There's some cool stuff. There's use cases popping up all over the place with the current global drivers. Maybe I can kind of go around the room with each of you. maybe Carlos, you and I have talked in the past about some of the things that we're seeing. Can you share, kind of a little bit of the use cases that you think really kind of demonstrate and explain what you just talked about with IoT Edge, AI, ML, and then I'd love to hear from Azita and Willie as you guys cross industries. Obviously, Azita, you see it in retail, but maybe we'll start, Ricardo, and we'll go around and share some of the use cases.
Very well. Very exciting things are happening in healthcare, specifically. The automation around patient care, there's a lot of things that can be done through intelligent devices. For instance, one of our partners in Mexico City, they are developing a camera that analyzes the position of a patient in the room, and in particular can detect if the patient gets up from the bed, for instance, to go to the bathroom. It can examine whether the patient is stable or whether they are stumbling or have difficulties walking, and then based on that can raise an alert with nurses to provide care for them. More general area here, for instance, that company, by the way, is called ID Care. I will put it in the chat in case that people want to take a look at this. Another startup that is very, very recent is called Xenos. So they have what they call a privacy preserving camera that only measures affluence, for instance, in a common area, how many people are coming, checks that there's not too many, or can also make some predictions regarding the demographics, male, female, and so on. And this can be used for a variety of purposes, from safety to marketing to all kinds of different things. And just another example that I will use on the educational side, we're beginning to see really innovative solutions coming. A lot of that on the back of AR, VR. So this would be augmented reality. Take the Tate Museum in London, for instance. They have an application where you can go around the museum, you point with your telephone at a given piece of art, whether it's a sculpture or a picture and so on, and it will tell you about the artist, when it was painted or sculpted and so on, whatever other additional information about it. And obviously the applications here are boundless. Some of this is actually coming back towards the medical field. For instance, there's a company called Theater who have the amazing ambition of actually providing an assistance to surgeons in real time, so that they have a camera examining what the surgeon is doing and being able to advise a surgeon on where they are perhaps cutting or where they should be careful, or perhaps a condition that wasn't previously known, and provides a warning to the surgeon. So the applications are really unbounded. I mean, I think this field will go extremely far.
Yeah, agreed. Thanks for that. And maybe, Azita, Carlos talked about, healthcare. I know you're working a lot with some of the biggest retailers in this country, and even that ecosystem that touches retail and customer products. So can you share a little bit about some of your experiences and what you're seeing?
Yeah, absolutely. And interestingly, we actually work a lot with supermarkets, mass merchants, and fast food restaurants. And surprisingly, they're the portion of retail that actually have seen a dramatic increase in the volume of sales. And that has put a tremendous pressure on the whole supply chain side of it. And so I'll talk about a couple of examples that I think it's really interesting. The first is what I call intelligent stores. And that's basically leveraging video analytics technology at the edge inside the stores for several capabilities. And I see like 4 areas that's really big. One is asset protection, or basically preventing theft. And the retail industry is losing $100 billion with a B globally to theft. And believe it or not, a lot of that theft is happening at self-checkout lanes, where people are stacking, let's say, like 2 steaks and scanning it as one, or they're taking Kit Kat and putting it underneath a bottle of whiskey and scanning it as a Kit Kat, right? And so there's AI technology, very proven, very mature, that actually catches those discrepancies and shuts down the machine and notifies an employee. And employees do not confront customers. They'll come back and say, sorry, let me reset the machine and let me help you scan it for you, right? And so that is 1.5% of their revenue. And think about it, because retailers' net profit margin is 2%. It's laser thin. And so if you can even prevent half of that theft, which a lot of it is happening at self-checkout, and there's technologies out there that have 95% accuracy in catching it, the retailers are saving significant amount of money. But then there are other use cases that builds on the same technology, the same cameras. One is autonomous shopping, which is basically the Amazon Go style shopping. And of course, with COVID and everything, more and more retailers want to eliminate employee customer interaction. They want to let the customers be able to check out themselves very quickly and easily in a frictionless way. So that's another area. A third area is store analytics, to understand the behavior of customers inside the stores and be able to then optimize your merchandising or optimize, where you're going to put your high value stuff in the store based on where the high traffic area is. And then the new area is curbside pickup, right? A lot of us now are ordering online and either have it delivered to our house or have curbside pickup. There's nothing worse than the wrong order getting put in the back of your car, right? And so video technology is identifying that, the type of car and the model and the color of the car, to make sure that the right order is loaded to the right car. And then on the supply chain side, there's a lot of AI intelligence that's getting added to these distribution centers. I think that today, Amazon probably has the most sophisticated distribution centers, and we are now working with some of the top equipment manufacturers of these distribution centers. One of them is Dematic, which is a US company here based out of Atlanta, and they've developed AI intelligence for their machines. So it enables them to basically increase the throughput in the distribution centers, whether it's intelligent cabinets, whether it's conveyor belts that change their speeds, whether it's robotics that pick and pack the orders. And so being able to improve the throughput inside a distribution center by 30% is a significant amount of cost savings and revenue accelerator, because retailers can actually fulfill the orders significantly faster and with much more accuracy. So those are two examples that I would say for inside the stores versus distribution centers that are right at the edge and have a big financial benefits for these retailers.
So are you seeing with these customers, we all know the environment with the pandemic has changed a lot of things, but are you seeing a greater need to accelerate some of this work? Like, what kind of, from your perspective, what's happening faster? I mean, obviously the world's changed in the last 6 months, right? But what's changing in terms of those types of examples you gave?
So what's changing is the need for agility. Yeah. Everything changes, right? Like everything went crazy in April, right? You couldn't find toilet paper. Then it kind of got better. And then now you can't find toilet paper again, right? So the customer buying behavior is changing, the supply is changing, right? And so AI is bringing agility to these retailers, and they know that. We saw that, with COVID, I think in the first 3 months, the retailers were in massive shock. It's like the volume coming to e-commerce dramatically increased, and they were just trying to keep their website up. But now they're really into, how do I make my operations more agile? And so, for example, something that's not edge, but absolutely impacts edge is forecasting. Being
Right.
able to use AI for much more accurate forecasting and be able to run forecasting in a daily basis as opposed to a weekly basis, that impacts everything you order and your supply chain and what comes into your distribution center, right? And so where we're seeing a lot of interest is basically on the asset protection or theft side, because everybody's adding more self-checkout lanes. We're seeing a big focus on forecasting and a big focus on adding AI intelligence to the distribution centers. That's where we see a lot of that. And of course, on the e-commerce side, better recommendation system and ability for customers to find exactly what they're looking for using, much more granular way of tagging their products. Like, for example, how can I find only cereals that are vanilla taste but are gluten-free or something?
Right.
So that's what we're seeing, where a lot of interest is coming from the retailers.
Yeah, no, that's great. And everything seems to be accelerating, right? And I would love to have Willie share a little bit. Willie, I know you're very close to what's the impact that the world is facing as it relates to transportation.
Right.
And there's lots of different industries that I know you and your team work with. Can you share a little bit about some other types of use cases? And then I'd like to talk a little bit about, some of the technology enablers and challenges that you all see the industries facing. But before we get to that, maybe Willie, can you share some of your thoughts on what you're seeing?
Yeah, definitely. I think, we've all got very similar experiences, and it sounds like a lot of these are very camera driven or camera intense, but again, the edge is not just the cameras. That is an obvious starting place. Like, when we talk to cities and we talk to organizations, a lot of our insertion strategy focuses around what have you done with cameras and placement, and how are you leveraging those today? So, you mentioned transportation as a great example of the airports. There are security cameras everywhere. How am I leveraging those security cameras? How am I leveraging data from those security cameras? And how am I implementing newer video analytics solutions, what we call computer vision, to apply a change in procedure to make it easier for me to check in? So as I get out of my car at the curb, as I go to the desk, I've got facial recognition, depending again on privacy and in local laws and things like that. But can I leverage that type of a system to help speed my way through those check-in lines as I go in? How do I enable smart baggage, right, where I can check where my bag is at physically, not just by, hey, your bag made it on the plane, but where is it on the plane? Where is it on the plane with me? Where is it at in baggage? All those things are enabled by different types of sensors, but also through camera technologies. And I think that the interesting thing is the ability to leverage, to start looking and saying, hey, I've already got an investment in a camera, right? I'm going to leverage that to maybe do additional things with that. So we've seen projects where we've started with kind of a base security, move towards, hey, how do we automate check-in? Then you're like, hey, I've got a big parking garage that sits outside of this airport. Can I leverage that camera infrastructure, maybe changing some of the things in there, and now automate smart parking? How many empty spots do I have? Because I can leverage an algorithm that can detect, hey, I see this many cars, I see this many empty spaces, I see this many number of people walking to or from their cars. That absolutely helps me. And I think in the pandemic space, in the post-pandemic space around travel and mass transportation, not just airlines, but how you're getting into the tube or bus stops or things like that, is you're going through those major terminals. Those are areas where they're going to have to change permanently, right? They're going to have to make adjustments to say, there is another lockdown, there is another pandemic, there is something else I may need to do or continue on with this pandemic. So I still need to, have the ability to queue people through safely and to make sure the environment that they're interacting with is safe. And that's all edge computing. We're looking at things like air quality sensors, right? So it's not just people coming in that have fevers, but it's also, is the environment that they're walking into have good airflow? Is there a high density of humidity, or is there a low airflow in there that would be a conduit for me to maybe catching a virus more frequently? So those are the things that building designers and A&E firms are looking at to say, we need to couple what we were doing before and adding in this additional information. And again, all that has to compute at the edge. It's going to help me turn fans on or open doors or automate procedures where I have those alertings set by my AI systems from a billable perspective.
But it sounds like what you're describing, though, is where there's maybe been some traditional safety, security, infrastructure, and the cameras is really now evolved to the computer vision, the sensors. How do we go and do a lot more than kind of what's been, because I think, you know, the safety security piece has been around for a long time, right?
Correct.
It's
Yeah.
How are you building on that with sensors to improve or impact the experience of whether it's a customer or, in Carlos's case, a patient or a consumer. So
100%.
it's building on it. And so taking that, I'd love to kind of frame this up for you all to talk about, you know, technology enablers and challenges that you've seen. And I'll give you one example to kind of open the conversation. I met recently with a very, very large retailer, and they said to me, we have 30 IoT edge-like projects in our stores. Well, there sounds like there's some challenges with that, you know, from my perspective. But, you know, so there's a conversation to be had, I think, about, you know, how do you set up these environments? But more importantly, in your experience, if you were giving some advice to, you know, the attendees of this conference or customers and businesses you meet with, what are some of the things that you think about that they need to be kind of the watch out for list?
Sure, I'm happy to go with that.
Go ahead. Yeah, please.
Sure. You know, so I think that companies, the large companies, have to really look at, you know, build versus buy, right? And what we notice is there's very few, at least on the retail side, very few companies that have enough data scientists that can build the majority of their solution. But most importantly, it's speed to value. For example, on the theft side, there are startups out there that have 100 engineers full-time working on building the best asset protection solution out there, right? And every time we've seen a retailer going, well, I don't want to pay for this software, I'm going to build it myself. First of all, it's 1 or 2 years before they build it. Well, guess what? A typical large merchant, like a Target, they're losing like $500,000 per store per year. So multiply that. If they had 1,000 stores, they actually have 2,000 stores, but if they had 1,000 stores, it's $500 million a year. Is that really worth it? I mean, you're better off buying a solution for a fraction of that price that actually can be deployed in 3 months and stop the loss, right? So I think that that's one important decision. Now, in other areas, you might say, no, well, we've got a data science team and we want to build some. So I think companies really need to look at, what are the different areas that AI can bring value to their company, and then choose 1 or 2 use cases that are going to drive the highest business value and get started with that. And for example, like I said, we're seeing that in the stores, it's about preventing theft. So it allows them to add more checkout lanes and make it easier for customers to check out, but at the same time, not increase the theft. And forecasting, because that forecasting then enables them to make sure they have the right products at the right stores at the right time, or be able to get that to people's homes at the right time. So it's understanding the overall AI benefit and building an infrastructure that supports the scaling of, okay, I'm starting with, asset protection, but pretty soon I want to add 3 other capabilities in the same store. So like you said, I've got 20 projects going on. Don't do 20 projects, but maybe you should at least think through the infrastructure that supports those potentially 20 projects at the edge. Start with 1 or 2 and that deliver the best business value, and then the rest of it pays for itself. If you're stopping 1.5% of your revenue being stolen, you've actually, in essence, will pay for all 22 projects. right?
Yeah, and that aligns well with what Willie said, right? Where they're taking that infrastructure that may exist in an airport today that does one thing, and then what are the high values that you add into that, right? Instead of going and recreating. Carlos, would love your thoughts on, you know, challenges, technology enablers as businesses try to leverage edge type solutions for their business.
Yeah, at the moment, I would say that intelligence at the edge remains almost a craft. Yeah.
Well said. Well said.
A lot of this that looks like magic actually is done through a lot of manual processes behind the scenes. The state of the art keeps pushing the development of models that do increasingly sophisticated things, but then you hit the problems of having a compatible stack on the device, of having connectivity. Does it have enough memory? You know, the models are almost like living things in a way. You have to retrain them all the time. Sometimes they get much bigger, right? And you try to optimize them. There's a lot of complexity behind the scenes happening at the edge. I'm looking in Azita's direction almost. I'm thinking about, for instance, mixed precision. Sometimes you use integers when you do your artificial intelligence application. Sometimes you use floating point numbers, for instance, right? There is untold amount of parameters that go into these applications, and you're constantly having to tune them for performance and adequacy. Then the IoT part, if you will, of actually managing potentially thousands or even millions of devices, keeping them in sync, understanding their hardware configurations and so on. You know, there's a whole host of operationalization challenges for which we don't yet have tools out there in the market. And to make this even more fun, you actually have the accelerating hardware that is going into the edge is evolving super fast. The amount of innovation is actually, I mean, the product cycles are actually getting compressed. Yeah, so the people that have to do machine learning, they're very smart and everything, but I'll tell you, those that actually operationalize the models, they have to be even smarter in order to not only reach operationalization, but keep it operationalized. Yeah, it's a very, very big challenge. And I think that this is actually spawning an entire new industry. I see startups all over the place with very nice solutions to address some of these problems. This year, for instance, I have seen a lot of companies, a significant number of companies doing experimentation management. You know, just running experiments is actually creating new companies. So it's very exciting to think and see how much new innovation is going to happen in the operationalization.
Yeah, absolutely. And Willie, maybe because I think that's a great segue to talk about new innovation and what's next, right? So would love you to kind of give us some of your thoughts on challenges, but maybe extend that out to what do you see? What's coming? What's the future? And then I'd love to get your insight on future and innovation a little more, Carlos and Azita, and then we'll open up for a Q&A. So if anyone has any questions, please use the Q&A feature in the Zoom, and I'd be happy to go through that after we close out on these comments.
So just to close out, because I think Azita and Carlos made some very good points, right, around you need a solid partner with the right structure inside the organization to support what you're looking at, right? There's a ton of startup organizations out there that build kind of in a silo, and they build great products, don't get me wrong, but you have to think about how does that fit into the model? How does that fit into my company and what I'm trying to do? And so you need the right infrastructure to sit and run those things. But it's also the optimization that Carlos talked about. And a great example of that is we had a partner that we worked with that came in and said, hey, we run this set of algorithms across this environment, right? We're going to look at customer traffic coming in through a retail environment. And we really looked at that and working back with even Nvidia, like partners like Nvidia that can help optimize those workloads. You're able to take something that can only pass 7 streams through a server, up to 70. You increase the number of the density of the algorithm, the ability for that algorithm to run more efficiently. So we're changing actual algorithmic coding. We're leveraging the power of what we can do inside of a GPU, and you're reducing the footprint that it requires me to run, one or two or three different use cases across that. That's the hundreds of thousands of dollars of savings per use case that you drop. So it's really important to look, again, what is the infrastructure opportunity I have? What is the partner ecosystem and their ability to support? And then you sit down at the table and put those two things together. And I think there's a tendency to kind of like, hey, that looks like they've got a great data loss solution here, or they've got this, or they've got a use case that's attracting me to it, and I want to gravitate towards that because the pricing model looks fine or something. It's not always the best decision given what you're looking to do. So I'd say as a pitfall, be very careful in that regard.
Yeah, and if I can.
Yeah, go ahead.
Oh,
Yeah.
sorry. Go ahead.
Please. No, please.
Go ahead.
Now, if I can add to that, I mean, I think what Willie said is right on. And one of the key things we do at Nvidia is not only help customers develop their own AI solutions, but we actually work with the majority of the startups, because we always believe disruption comes from the startups. And so, it's not just our GPUs, but more importantly, what Willie just referred to is our application frameworks. We've developed software libraries for data science. We've developed software libraries for video analytics. And these software libraries are the ones that take, 7 streams, compute at the edge to 70. That increases it 10 times, because NVIDIA is not a GPU company. We're an accelerated computing company, right? And also we understand what are the best models. I mean, a lot of times you see some startups or some customers start with some very basic models, but having worked with, hundreds of ISVs, we know what models actually end up delivering the best accuracy. And so we can even advise people on, what models do you start with, and be able to get to a better, more accurate recommendation much sooner.
Yeah, exactly. And I think keeping on that kind of theme of models, Carlos, as we kind of round out this discussion on what are you seeing that's new and innovative? Where is the kind of the green space in this whole discussion around edge and AI? So would love your comments on that.
I can tell you that in Facebook, we're super excited about AR, VR, right? Yeah. Looking at the way, how TikTok kind of appeared out of nowhere, and how far they went so quickly is, I think, an excellent example, something that MBA programs should actually consider teaching, right? Because that is exactly, even if it is entertainment at the end of the day, but it is also a connection between people. That was just the beginning, if you will, of what is going to be an absolutely humongous field right in front of us. If anything, COVID-19 has actually increased the motivation to go faster in this space and provide ways for devices at the edge to modify our perception or the interaction that we have with our environment, right? So the other point that I would like to make perhaps is that AI is not about algorithms or accelerators and so on. It's really about data. And where I think that I see a lot of very optimistic space opening up is in the privacy protecting machine learning. Yeah. Collecting data is super hard, okay? And the differences in the amount of data that the market leaders have compared to, if you will, the next set of companies, you're talking about, it's not like they have 50% more. It's like they have 1,000 times more.
Yeah, right.
Okay. It is the abundance and the ability to collect data that can drive innovation more than anything else. And of course, you have to be good about curating the data, getting the right data, ensuring that it is high quality and that you keep the flow of data. That is how companies are building competitive advantage. So differential privacy is now going it's a new technology. It's a little bit over the horizon, but it is arriving. It will allow, for instance, hospitals to collaborate in building models to scan, say, cell images without having to share patient data.
Right.
So, and this can actually be extended in a major way. Now, markets like China and the US benefit from having companies that can actually collect a lot of data, but look at the market segmentation that we have in Europe, right? Companies are a lot smaller, and on top of that, you also have a legislative restriction around privacy that is a lot tighter and stronger, more stringent. So differential privacy is going to be an enabler for collaboration at a scale that we haven't seen before. So that's an area where I see with a lot of excitement.
Yeah, and differential privacy is going to be something we're going to hear a lot more about in the future, right? Like very, very new. Like you're talking very new stuff, like within the last 30 days.
It is very, very new indeed.
Yeah, so probably some of our attendees, and I'm sure Silicon Valley is already getting out in front of what are the technologies that need to support this differential privacy.
I will put in the chat a couple of resources. First of all, I shared the list of the references that I used earlier, and I'm going to put a little bit of information about differential privacy.
Thank you. And while you're doing that, maybe we can move to a Q&A. I just got a text from Willie. He's had a technical glitch. So Azita and Carlos and I will address the questions the best we can. So question we have here, stand by, please. I've just lost my questions. I think someone was asking about how to engage with Nvidia. What's the process for a startup to engage with Nvidia? So that would be for you, Azita.
Sure. Yeah, I can take that. So we have an Inception website where startups can go there and apply to become an Inception partner. And then basically we have a pool of technical experts that can help you leverage some of our software libraries, pre-trained models, and all of those things. And then as the startups, become bigger, or their solution is specific to only one industry, they kind of graduate and get managed with people, for example, in my team for the retail ISVs. But usually the path to engagement with NVIDIA starts with our Inception. And there's a website that you can get to and apply online.
Great. So there's another question from Frank. I'll read this. Can you please define where you see the edge to be? And maybe this is kind of a little more, Carlos, on some of your opening comments. The question goes on to say, I heard transportation, warehouse optimization, et cetera. The industry now seems to be talking about the near edge, the far edge. Some devices are an edge. My phone, my car, my house network is an edge of sorts with ring and alarm. Some clarity on which edge you're referring to for processing would be good.
Okay, the easiest way to answer this question would be if a device has an IP address, and if it has a microprocessor, that is basically the base requirement, right? Then if it has a GPU, then you're talking about serious business. That is definitely would be an intelligence edge. And Frank, I realize that sometimes we use these terms and we do not use them in a consistent way across all of the industry. It's just, it is unfortunately the way it is. You can pretty much define artificial intelligence as being, whatever humans can do that machines cannot do. That has been the case for the last 50 years, right? And as we advance more and more, then artificial intelligence now is becoming like artificial general intelligence, which, by the way, I don't believe in, but that's a separate subject. Therefore, yeah, we do have to suffer a little bit with some ambiguities in how these terms are being used. Your ring system is definitely edge, for instance. And anything that has a sensor in it that in some way is connected back to a network and can be used by your mobile application, for instance, to get alarms and what have you, that would also be considered an edge application.
Yeah, I would add to that, if you think of AI, you train a model with massive amount of data, but you're training it to make recommendations, right? And if that recommendation is happening at the edge, so if a factory machine is stopped by an AI algorithm because it predicts that it's going to fail and it'll stop the machine before it fails, or like I said, if you stop a point of sale machine when theft is happening, that's basically when the algorithm is making some kind of a recommendation and an action at the edge. And as Carlos says, it's anything that's connected, has an IP address that can receive that recommendation, or as Carlos said, has a GPU right there at the edge, because the compute is happening right there. It has to compute and say, was this a theft? Is this, the right SKU for a bottle of whiskey? And if not, it has to make a recommendation to stop the machine, right? So I would say anything. I mean, examples is, tractors that are very, very precisely deciding, what to fumigate, while at the same time not fumigate the strawberries, for example. That's happening at the edge. It's a tractor actually literally has a little GPU on it, all the way to obviously millions of examples. And it's so much bigger than the data center opportunity, right? The whole use of AI at the edge is significantly bigger than use of AI at the data center. And today we haven't even tapped 1% of that opportunity.
Yeah, and I think to both your points, right? It's the sheer amount of data that we're going to see at the edge. If you take, and this kind of goes to Frank's question a little bit, in the United States today, and this is a data point, there are 150 million electricity consumers. About 50 of them have smart meters. Just reading those smart meters every 15 minutes generates over 1 billion gigabytes of data every year. Mm-hmm. How do you then use that data to do other things? And maybe those other things, as you see energy transform, the modernized grid, and you're seeing, this transition, how do things start to happen in the energy industry to determine when certain things happen at certain times of the day to be able to manage that modernized grid? So it's all about the data. It's all about transformation. I know we're running up against the clock here. Just to close out, not sure if we have, I don't see any other questions, bit of sharing in the chat, but maybe just stand by, please. There's one more. There is one more question, and then we'll wrap. IoT edge devices will be prone to attack. Would you folks as OEMs be open to a service that requires loading a firmware image to secure your data devices from security breach? We didn't talk too much about security. We talked a little bit about privacy. Maybe as we wrap up here, thoughts on that? Maybe each of the panelists can comment on the security piece of this conversation.
Yeah, I'm happy to go first. I mean, we're collaborating very much with Dell and all the OEMs. Nvidia actually introduced our EGX solution that leverages our Mellanox security, and it's precisely for managing thousands of remote devices securely and being able to secure at operating system level, at application level, and most importantly, at algorithm level. I mean, this is the IP of many of the companies that have developed these AI applications that they're selling for millions of dollars, and they want their algorithms to be protected. So we certainly have a joint solution with Dell and other OEMs that is very much focused on security at the edge.
Thank you. Carlos, comments on security?
I have to be frank, this is not my area of expertise. Let me yield to Willie, who I think has a lot of ideas in this area.
Back, right? If we got him back,
no problem.
That's a good point.
Yeah, I apologize.
There we go.
Never, always a perfect storm. But no, yeah, I definitely think that OEMs like Dell and Nvidia, we are very interested in what's in the market around that. We innovate as much as we can on the platforms we have. There's a number of security, levers that we do within the firmware, within the, down to the CPU, or not down to the code and down to the raw hardware. And then there's additional elements that we bring in, things like carbon black and some of the other added pieces that help that. But as you can imagine, security, Haley had mentioned the number of devices and the amount of data, those are always intrusion points, right? SCADA, for example, is a great example of that, right? I can potentially, I have all kinds of security holes when I'm virtualizing SCADA and getting into turning on and off valves, through some sort of cyber attack. So absolutely, I think that's something we would want to, have a discussion on. And I think any OEM or any device manufacturer would be very interested to hear that story from you.
Yeah, absolutely.
This person wants you to look at sensorbound.com as also a solution for Dell.
Yeah, I think it would be, an interesting discussion to have later, Yvonne, with ACG and some of your members, and have a security panel, like as a kind of a follow-on to this, because we didn't get too much on that, and there are some real experts. And I know we have members in our ACG community that know this topic. So in closing, I want to thank the panelists. Any additional comments to wrap things up? We covered quite a bit, so.
No, I think we did.
Okay. Well, thank you. Thank you to our attendees for taking time out of your day to hear our panelists share their experiences and what we're seeing in the marketplace. Would love to, like I said, follow on with security, Yvonne, but thank you for giving us this platform.
Thank you very much. Wonderful panel discussion. Really appreciate all the information that you were able to share with our ACG Silicon Valley community. And I look forward to having one or all of you back on another panel one of these days. Haley, thank you so much for moderating Dell Technologies. Once again, thank you for sponsoring. And everyone, have a great afternoon, and we'll see you soon.
Thank you, everyone.
Thank you, guys.
Happy
Thank you.
Thanksgiving too. All the best. Bye-bye.
Thanks.